All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a massive, truly game-changing shift in military history that completely revolutionized the battlefields of the English Civil War. We're going to look at the terrifying, thunderous debut of cavalry shock tactics and how a violent clash of ideas between two very different types of armies literally changed the course of history.
Where England's sorrows began. Those are the incredibly ominous words of Parliamentarian Hugh Peters after a clash at Powick Bridge in September 1642. This was the first true engagement of the English Civil War, and the Parliamentarian forces had just experienced something they had never, ever seen before. Around 1,000 of their horsemen ran into a similar number of Royalist cavalry and were violently, immediately swept off the field. Their conventional rules of engagement were shattered in a matter of minutes. So what exactly hit them?
Well, that brings us to part 1. Enter Prince Rupert.
Now, the crucial thing to understand here is that Prince Rupert wasn't just some privileged royal relative playing dress-up. Yes, he was King Charles I's nephew, but he was also a hardened veteran of the grueling 30 Years' War over on the European continent. After being captured by the Holy Roman Empire and later freed through his uncle's diplomatic maneuvering, Rupert came to England to join the king's army. And fun fact here, he even brought his famous hunting poodle Boy, who actually rode right into battle with him. But he didn't just bring his dog and his sword, he brought cutting-edge violent tactics from Europe designed to completely turn the tide for the Royalists.
Which sets us up perfectly for part 2, Dutch versus shock tactics.
So, at the time, Parliament relied heavily on what were known as Dutch tactics. Basically, their horsemen would remain largely stationary, using the height advantage of their horses to fire carbines and pistols from the saddleback. By contrast, Prince Rupert introduced shock tactics. He unleashed a kinetic, blunt-force trauma weapon. Instead of standing still and shooting, his men executed high-speed, direct, physical mounted charges. By definition, a shock tactic is a devastating military maneuver utilizing the sheer momentum, speed, and physical weight of charging horses to shatter enemy lines. Imagine the sheer terror of this for a second. You're a parliamentarian soldier, you're stationary, frantically trying to reload a clumsy firearm, and suddenly, a wall of thousands of armored men and massive horses is thundering toward you at full speed. It was absolute psychological and physical destruction. The thundering hooves completely swept away Parliament's stationary horsemen in those early battles.
And Rupert's early trajectory was terrifyingly fast. After the initial shock at Powick Bridge in September 1642, the tactic made its grand debut a month later at the massive Battle of Edgehill, where both of the Royalist cavalry wings launched a head-on charge and completely cleared the enemy horsemen from the field. By July 1643, at Roundway Down, the Royalist advantage in horsemen paid off again, shattering the Parliamentarian line and sending terrified enemy cavalry tumbling down a steep hidden drop known as Bloody Ditch. Rupert was racking up these devastating victories, but this timeline ends with an ultimate showdown at Marston Moor in 1644. Because, as we're about to see, initial momentum isn't everything.
Despite this kinetic dominance on the battlefield, the Royalist war effort hit a massive wall. Let's look at part 3, the fatal flaw.
It begs a pretty massive question. I mean, think about this. If you possess a tactical superweapon that sweeps the enemy off the field every single time you deploy it, why didn't this unstoppable cavalry immediately win the war for King Charles?
The answer actually boils down to one single word: indiscipline.
The really bitter irony here is how cause and effect were linked. The sheer adrenaline and thrill of the shock charge directly caused the troops to lose control. For instance, at the Battle of Edgehill, after Rupert's men effortlessly swept the Parliamentarian horsemen away, they should have pivoted to hit the exposed Parliamentarian infantry in the flanks and rear. Historians largely agree that if they had just halted, regrouped, and charged, they could have ended the entire English Civil War right there on that field. Instead, flushed with the glory of victory, the individual soldiers completely broke ranks. They chased the fleeing enemy for miles. They ran off to plunder the enemy baggage trains. By abandoning the battlefield for loot, they threw away decisive, war-winning victories.
That massive blind spot gave the Parliamentarian forces the exact breathing room they needed to adapt. Welcome to Part 4, the Ironside Evolution.
Enter Oliver Cromwell and the incredible evolution of the Parliamentarian forces. Parliament realized they needed a permanent professional military, what would eventually become the new model army. As part of this evolution, Oliver Cromwell rises as Lieutenant General of Horse. Now, Cromwell is a fascinating figure here because he looked at Rupert's cavalry and realized Parliament desperately needed that kinetic shock tactic. But he perfected it by injecting the exact thing Prince Rupert completely lacked:
total organizational control. Cromwell built a unit known as the Ironsides, highly trained, intensely disciplined mounted troops who could deliver a shattering charge, but critically, would stop and await orders the very second the charge was over.
So, these two totally opposing cavalry philosophies are now on a collision course, bringing us to our final act, Part 5, the Marston Moor Showdown in July 1644.
The situation was incredibly dire for King Charles' men. The Royalist army, led by Prince Rupert and the Earl of Newcastle, fielded about 18,000 troops, and they were facing a massive combined Allied force of 28,000. With such a heavy numerical disadvantage in the infantry, the performance of the elite Royalist cavalry on the wings wasn't just important, it was an absolute necessity for their survival.
As thunder is literally cracking and lightning is flashing in the early evening, the battle kicks off. On the left wing, Oliver Cromwell charged headlong at the Royalist horse. In this initial, messy clash of swords and pistols, Cromwell actually drives the Royalists back. Seeing this, Prince Rupert personally rallies his elite reserves and his own lifeguard, feeding them into the chaotic, grinding contest of sword against sword to hit Cromwell's flanks. For a moment, Parliament's lines buckled. But then, a Parliamentarian reserve of 1,000 Scottish troopers swept forward and slammed into both of Rupert's exposed flanks. Attacked from the front and the sides, the Royalist front line was just scythed apart.
And here is the absolute climax of our tactical story. Over on the other side of the battlefield, Royalist commanders like Lord Goring had actually managed to rout the Parliamentarian cavalry. But, exactly as before, they broke ranks to go plunder the enemy baggage train. Meanwhile, Cromwell's Ironsides proved their worth. After breaking Rupert's cavalry, they maintained full control, they halted their pursuit, and they looped entirely around to crush the exposed Royalist infantry from behind.
The result? Absolute devastation for the Royalists. After hours of brutal fighting, 4,000 men of the King's army lay strewn across the bloody moor. The great Royalist army of the North was shattered, and their grip on northern England was lost forever. Prince Rupert retreated in shame, his invincible cavalry finally broken. Not by a better weapon, but by a better system.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. Prince Rupert undeniably changed the face of 17th century warfare with a brilliant, brutal tactical innovation. But was that raw innovation ultimately useless without the institutional discipline to actually wield it? It's a timeless lesson about strategy and execution that stretches way beyond the muddy fields of the English Civil War. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.